Good afternoon. My name is Amy Giorgiani, and as the chair of the Board of Historic Resources, I hereby call this meeting to order to take action to discuss or transact the business statutorily required or necessary to continue the operation of the Board of Historic Resources. Board is assembled in person at Maymont in Richmond. DHR is also presenting today's meeting virtually to facilitate attendance by individuals unable to physically attend. And the meeting is being recorded. Perfect timing. Deputy directors, will you please proceed the roll call?
Thank you.
Here.
Dr. Rutherford, Dr. Spivey, Mr. Towns,
Here.
Mr. Boskett,
Here.
Sutson,
Here.
and Chair Giorgiani.
Here. All right, I will now read our land acknowledgement statement. The Department of Historic Resources, the Board of Historic Resources, and the State Review Board acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of Virginia and express its gratitude for their continued stewardship of her lands and waterways over many generations. We also acknowledge the free and enslaved Africans and their descendants, whose labors and contributions on behalf of the Commonwealth have long been overlooked. We commit ourselves to meaningful engagement with all Virginians, past and present, as we strive to fulfill our charge as stewards of Virginia's long and rich history. The Virginia Board of Historic Resources is the official policymaking board of the Commonwealth of Virginia, created by the Code of Virginia. Its policies are implemented by the Department of Historic Resources, which day in and day out labors on behalf of our irreplaceable resources in the interest of the citizens of this Commonwealth. The board is charged primarily with the responsibility for designating historic landmarks of local, statewide, or national significance, establishing a historic preservation practices for the care and management of our Virginia historic landmarks, designating state recognized historic districts and archaeological sites and zones, approving historical highway markers, reviewing programs and services of the agency, and making recommendations to the director of DHR and the governor regarding programs and services, and in order to preserve important sites and buildings in perpetuity. And finally, accepting voluntarily granted gifts of preservation easements over historic properties to the Commonwealth. The Governor of Virginia selects members of the board from volunteer and professional leaders of Virginia's history, preservation, and museum communities. Votes taken during this meeting are official actions of the Commonwealth of Virginia Board of Historic Resources. We are still joined here today by Andrew Tarn and Wes Morgan of the Office of the Attorney General, DHR staff, and the agency director, Julie Langland. And we've got a couple visitors, guests in the crowd as well. I now invite my fellow board members to introduce themselves.
Hi, Mary Pope Hudson, president of Sweetbriar College, Sweetbriar, Virginia.
Pollard, I'm the head of the Land and Community Program for Southern Environmental Law Center and policy chair for Preservation Virginia, and I live in Chesterfield.
Amy Giorgiani with Falls Church, Virginia. I work for the architect of the Capitol.
Martin Towns. I'm from King William County. I'm the deputy butler at the governor's mansion and also the mansion historian.
Good afternoon. I'm Jamie Boskett, president of the State History Museum, and I'm from Richmond, Virginia.
I have the notice here in these remarks with the notice of a hybrid meeting format. If we might have Dr. Spivey on the phone.
She's unable to text.
Okay, got that. But we are recording this meeting. So do we have public comment in this afternoon
I
session?
don't have anybody signed up.
Okay. All right. Do I need to go through that portion then? Nobody signed up or?
I guess if there's no one as well.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'd like to will reiterate the Virginia Board of Historic Resources does desire to hear the viewpoints of interested citizens. If there is anybody signed up to speak, I don't believe that is the case. Otherwise, we will continue on. All right. So next we'd like to introduce Dr. Jennifer Liu, who will present the historical highway marker portion of today's business.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jennifer Lukes. I'm the Highway Marker Program Manager, and I'll be presenting the marker agenda for today. And we will begin with our 9 new markers that are up for consideration. And so the first of these is First Baptist Church in Bermuda Hundred, Chesterfield County. This church traces its origins to 1850 and was formally organized around 1866. The Reverend Curtis W. Harris, a civil rights leader, became its pastor in 1959. The church stands on the former central marketplace of Bermuda Hundred. Transatlantic slave ships brought thousands of enslaved Africans here to be sold. And this became one of Virginia's official ports in 1691. When demand for labor surged in the southern Piedmont after about 1750, this became one of Virginia's largest slave auction sites. Most enslaved Africans who disembarked here, including many children, were marched to tobacco plantations where planters profited from their labor. The Old Carolina Road in Loudoun County, a Native American trade route that traversed Virginia, linking the Potomac River with the Carolinas, passed through Lucasville in present-day Loudoun County. By the mid-1750s, this Carolina Road had become an important southward migration route for settlers of European descent who crossed the Potomac at Nolan's Ferry. Like many other colonial roads, its path shifted over time, but its general corridor corresponds to US Route 15. During the Revolutionary War and the Civil War, the Carolina Road facilitated troop movements through this part of Northern Virginia. In May 1776, Thomas Jefferson traveled this route to Philadelphia, where he attended the Second Continental Congress and drafted the Declaration of Independence. Lewis and Clark in Botetourt County. Meriwether Lewis and William Clark were friends of Botetourt County native William Preston Jr., and so they spent a fair amount of time in this county. On a visit early in the 1800s, Clark met his future wife, Julia Hancock. After the expedition to the Pacific Ocean, Lewis and a group of Mandan Indians passed here on their way to Washington, D.C., and Clark received a congratulatory address from the citizens of Fincastle. Clark was in the county when he received his commission as Brigadier General of Militia for the Louisiana Territory in 1807, and he was married also in the county in 1808. Nicholas Biddle, a young writer and future president of the Second Bank of the United States, met with Clark in Fincastle before editing the official narrative of the expedition. Moore Street Missionary Baptist Church here in the city of Richmond. This church was dedicated on April 18, 1875 to serve an area of the Sheep Hill community, later known as the Carver neighborhood. The Reverend William Troy, founder of the church and its first pastor, was a freeborn man of color who had moved to Canada before the Civil War, and there he became a prominent abolitionist associated with the Underground Railroad. On the church's property stood the Moore Street Industrial Institution, which was a school for Black students. Longtime church member Virginia E. Randolph became widely known as an educational innovator through her work in Henrico County's public schools. Garvey movement in Newport News. Marcus Garvey founded the Universal Negro Improvement Association in 1914 and launched its 6th branch or division in Newport News in 1918. The UNIA, which expanded to hundreds of divisions internationally, promoted Pan-Africanism, Black economic independence, and racial pride and separatism. The branch in Newport News, where Garvey's message resonated with maritime and industrial laborers, was among the largest internationally. Garvey spoke at the Dixie Theater and at First Baptist Church in Newport News in 1919 to raise funds for the UNIA's Black Star Line, which was a steamship company. Audience members were among the earliest and most enthusiastic investors in that company. Next, we have the Addicts Theater in Norfolk. The Addicts Theater, known as the Apollo of the South, was built in 1919 in Norfolk's thriving Black business district. It was financed, constructed, and operated by African Americans and was designed by Black architect Harvey Johnson. Named for Crispus Attucks, who's regarded as the first casualty of the American Revolution, the theater was a venue for concerts, movies, plays, and community events. Performers there included Ruth Brown, Ella Fitzgerald, and Dizzy Gillespie, among many others. Rooms upstairs served as offices for Black professionals. The theater, which was known as the Booker T from 1934 until it closed in 1955, was listed in the Green Book, a guide for Black travelers during the segregation era. AKA Upsilon Omega, City of Richmond. On October 24th, 1925, Upsilon Omega became the Richmond's first chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, which was the first Greek letter organization founded by Black women. This graduate chapter, following the sorority's principles of scholarship, leadership, and service, focused on supporting students in public schools. Its inaugural chapter president, Dr. Zenobia Gilpin, was known for battling racial inequities in healthcare, and she organized clinics in Black churches that were emulated elsewhere in the country. Other members included Janet Ballard, who became the international president of AKA, and Dr. Grace Pleasance, who was the first Black national program director of the Girl Scouts of the USA. The chapter began meeting as a Fifth Church in the 1980s. And that's where Martha B. was. Next, we have Brookvale High School in Lancaster County. The county opened Brookvale High School to serve Black students in 1959, 5 years after the U.S. Supreme Court declared public school segregation unconstitutional. The Crusaders Political and Social Club, a civil rights organization, met frequently at the school. In 1969, Brookvale Warriors won the last state baseball championship overseen by the Virginia Interscholastic Association, which was the athletic league for Black schools during the segregation era. The county fully desegregated its schools in the fall of 1969, and the Brookvale building became an intermediate school. Brookvale's last principal, Dr. Elton Smith, later became the first Black public school superintendent in Virginia. And last among our new markers for today, we have Dr. King at Mount Level Baptist Church in Dinwiddie County. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke at Mount Level Baptist Church on March 28, 1962, during a people-to-people tour of communities in Southern Virginia. King and other officials of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference made stops in various places between Hopewell and Lynchburg, addressing crowds and actually going door to door, encouraging voter registration and trying to recruit civil rights workers. The Reverend Wyatt T. Walker, King's chief of staff and a former pastor of Mount Level, planned a visit to the church where King spoke to a full house about the importance of voting as a pathway to equality and justice for all. King also made a stop in the Rocky Branch community of Dinwiddie County. So those are the new markers for the board's consideration.
Okay, is there any discussion? The board, any questions? Questions? Is that largely the text that will be going on the markers?
Yeah, I summarized, I condensed them a little bit for today, but it's probably 90% of what is going to show up on the markers. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So if there's no further discussion at all, may I have a motion to approve the new highway markers 1 through 9?
So moved.
Good, thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. The markers, new highway markers 1 through 9 has been approved.
Thank you. Next item is our replacement markers, and we have 4 of these: Bushfield, Stewart's Ride Around McClellan, 2 noted homes, and the White Top Folk Festival. board members had these updated text in the marker memo. And so we don't usually go over these individually. So I'll ask for the board's approval of these 4 replacement highway markers.
Is there any discussion or questions for Dr. Lulu? Replacements? No. May I have a motion to approve the replacement markers 1 through 4?
So moved.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Replacement markers 1 through 4 is approved.
Thanks. So next up is the applications that are under consideration for the June board cycle. We received 12 applications at our last deadline, and a scoring committee of DHR staff scored them all. And so we would like to ask for the board's approval of topics numbered 1 through 8 and identify number 9 as the alternate for this round. And these will be the topics for which I'll be presenting the text at the June board meeting.
Are there any questions or discussion? Any worth noting or any some background on some of them that have been pending for a while? Or-
Not really. I mean, we haven't had a chance to start kind of working on these yet, but we're excited once we reviewed the applications. One thing I will note is you may all remember that there's been a backlog at Siwa Studios, which is the foundry that actually manufactures the markers. And on a positive note, so I think 2 years ago, we had about 50 markers that were in the production queue and hadn't been made yet. And now we're down to about 12. So they opened up a new production line. They are working their way through all of our orders. They've got the time to completion about halved. So it used to be 6 months. Now it's getting down toward 3 months. So the point of that update is to say that we're able to approve a handful more each quarter now than we had been a year or 2 ago, because they're actually able to manufacture these. So we're excited to be able to approve 8 this time.
The quality is still good, still the same.
Yeah. I mean, it's always hard to turn any down because it's all interesting history that people should know about. But we do still have limitations on what we can accommodate, of course. But yeah, we'll be happy to work on this.
All right, thank you. Let's see. Do I have may I have a motion to approve the applications for consideration at the June board meeting as presented?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor to approve these applications for consideration at the June board meeting, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Aye. The ayes have it. Is approved. And
Next up is the Northampton County Local Marker Program. So just as a reminder, that the board is considering this under this section of the Code of Virginia, which basically says that local governments can establish their own county or city level marker program, and that the locality is responsible for the information that appears on the sign. But the Board of Historic Resources is responsible for looking at the design of their markers and making sure that it's not too similar to the state markers so that they couldn't be confused with one another. So in this case, here's the visual comparison between the state marker and the proposal for Northampton County's local markers. You can see there's a difference in dimensions, color, shape, size. So we would like to ask for the approval of this local marker program, which it's something we always try to encourage, because for those topics that we just can't accommodate through the state program, this is a great alternative to that, because it really provides the same service. It alerts the public to something important about, in this case, local history that we would like for them to be educated about.
Is there any discussion or questions of the board? Well, pretty straightforward, looks different. All right, may I have a motion to acknowledge the design of the Northampton County local markers and that it's sufficiently differentiated from DHR's highway markers?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? None. That's, that motion is approved.
Thanks. And the last item for me is the Patriot Burials Marker Program. This is managed by the Pomeroy Foundation and the Sons of the American Revolution. And it's a little bit different because this isn't a locality in Virginia that's putting these markers out. It's sort of a national organization, and the signs could be placed anywhere throughout Virginia. So because it's not the state and it's not a locality, we have a little bit different method for approving these. So in this case, we're asking the board to approve both the text and the design of these markers. And here again, you can see these are quite different in appearance on the design front. And then as far as the text is concerned, this one will be placed in South Boston and Halifax County. And it's it's barely even one sentence worth of material, but DHR staff did review the sources and signed off on the accuracy of it. So we're comfortable with the text and the design.
Great. Any questions on this one?
And just to clarify, for this type, each sign has to come to the board because we have.
Yeah, so if there are more that are proposed, I'll have to bring the text of each one of those, similar to some of those Daughters of the American Revolution programs that we've seen.
May I have a motion to acknowledge that the design and text of the Patriot Burials Marker are sufficiently differentiated from the DHR highway markers?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of this motion, please say aye.
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 Opposed? The motion passes. Thank you, Dr. Liu. I believe that is all of them. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Now we will get an update from Joanna Wilson Green regarding state burial permits.
Go ahead, Joanna.
Hi, thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you for your time today. For my record, my name is Joanna Wilson Green. I'm the Department Cemetery Preservation Specialist, and this is your quarterly update on burial permitting. This is for information purposes only, and no action on your part is required. As you know, our permit program was created by the Code of Virginia, Section 10.1-2305, which was enacted in 1989 and most recently revised in 2024 to incorporate language specific to consultation with federally recognized tribes. The work is guided by Administrative Code Section 17 VAC 5-10 and promulgated by the board in 1991, revised in 2016. All actions we take during the permitting process are therefore taken on your behalf. Next slide, please. Thank you. I'm glad to report that we have had a delightfully quiet quarter with very limited activity in permitting. Between our previous meeting and today, we've issued only 2 permits, both of which are anticipatory, which means they do not accommodate purposeful disturbance or recovery of buried human remains. 9 existing permits have been closed. 7 were extended to accommodate project delays and complications. So that's it. Very quiet quarter. Have we got any questions at this point?
Any questions from the board? I don't believe so.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I just thought I'd take a moment to update you on a project that I mentioned during our last meeting. This was the Beach Road Unexpected Discovery in Chesterfield County. We issued the permit following the discovery of a brick vault that contains an iron coffin with a coffin plate that identified it as the interment of Nancy Graves, who died June 8th, 1858. And for the record, this is a very, very unusual occurrence for us. We rarely find an otherwise unmarked burial that has a name on it for us to use. An additional 17 burials were subsequently identified by archaeologists, but no other iron coffins were present. And since then, over a dozen living relatives have been identified through a really astounding genealogical investigation, and many have stayed on to advise and guide us through this process. Following the archaeological recovery of the 17 unmarked burials, Ms. Graves' coffin was lifted from her crypt intact and was transported to the local funeral home that is caring for all of the individuals from this cemetery. And everyone is scheduled to be reburied at Oak Grove Cemetery, which is also in Chesterfield County, at the direct request of their descendants, and this should take place this July. Next slide, please. And this is just a few photographs that we took. We were asked to be present for Miss Graves' relocation, and was handled very carefully by people who do this for a living. And she's in good hands along with the rest of her family members. So we're looking forward to having them reinterred and completing this process here about midsummer.
That's fascinating.
And that's all I have for you today.
Where's the date on that? Can we ask?
1958.
1858.
Because the slide said 19. I thought I heard her say 18. Yeah.
Yeah.
1850. Thank you.
1858, yeah. These coffins were only manufactured and in use for about a 30-year period. So
I was gonna say it looked pretty early for 1958.
Well, I appreciate your time, and I'll look forward to speaking with you again in June.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Green.
Thank you.
So our last course of business today focuses on the easement program. We'll begin with new easement offers for consideration, the first of which will be presented by the easement staff.
Go ahead, Wendy.
Good afternoon. I am Wendy Musumeci, the easement program coordinator here at DHR. I am going to be presenting a multifaceted project that is not quite as interesting as what Joanna just presented. And I will take a little bit of time to go through it for you today, but it relates to Culpeper Battlefield State Park. The park is owned and managed by the Department of Conservation and Recreation, or DCR. However, before I get into too many details about the current phase, which is the Cedar Mountain unit of the park, I just want to provide some background information and context. Culpeper Battlefield State Park is comprised of discontinuous areas in the Culpeper vicinity that are associated with multiple Civil War battles and sites, some of which include and are shown on the map here: Brandy Station, Cedar Mountain, Rappahannock Station 1 and 2, Kelly's Ford, and the Hansborough Ridge Winter Encampment. While the park focuses primarily on Civil War period history and battle activity, there are other significant historic resources related to Virginia's prehistory and history that are present on these properties, which DCR does intend to interpret. Phase 2 of acquisition for the park, which is what I'm presenting for your approval today, will cover the Cedar Mountain Battlefield unit, which is located southwest of the town of Culpeper and is circled in gold on the map here. To provide some background, the Virginia General Assembly approved legislation establishing the park in 2022. And the fiscal year 23-24 Virginia budget provided that DCR had to accept donation of at least 1,700 acres of real property in Culpeper County to establish the park. Both DHR and the Virginia Outdoors Foundation must assign any easements we hold on applicable acreage to DCR, and DCR's acquisition of lands for the park will occur and is occurring over multiple phases and years. For each phase of the project, DCR and DHR have agreed to partner as co-holders of an amended, restated, and consolidated easement over certain eased properties. The assignment of easements to DCR as required per the budget language, and amendment of the easements to include both DCR and the board as co-holders will be accomplished in one consolidated deed. Phase 1 of the project, which I presented this time last year, is shown in green and orange on this map. That phase incorporated properties within the Brandy Station battlefield and was open to the public in June of 2024. As a result of phase 1, the Board of Historic Resources and DCR now co-hold a single consolidated easement over roughly 168 acres of land. Phase 2, as I mentioned, will cover the Cedar Mountain battlefield, and Phase 3 is expected to include additional properties at Brandy Station, as shown in the gray-blue color on this map. And then there will be further phases after Phase 3 that kind of pick up the remaining areas and units of the park. The Battle of Cedar Mountain occurred in August 1862. It has a priority 2.2 Class B rating from the Civil War Sites Advisory Committee. During the battle, Confederate forces under Stonewall Jackson engaged Union artillery under the command of Nathaniel Banks. The Union artillery and infantry gained ground when an attack by General A.P. Hill forced them to fall back. The battle resulted in a Confederate victory and shifted the focus of fighting from the peninsula to Northern Virginia. As you can see on the battle map on the right, much of the fighting and engagement occurred directly on the Phase 2 properties, which are located in the core area of the battlefield. Phase 2 involves 7 separate properties that are all owned by the American Battlefield Trust, or ABT, and they are within the boundaries of this Cedar Mountain battlefield. Of the 7, 5 are currently subject to historic preservation and open space easements that are held by the Board of Historic Resources. This includes the Holvey Tract, Broomfield Tract, Proctor 1 Tract, Cedar Mountain or Trimble Tract, and the Pilgrims Battery Tract. The Wiseman Tract, which is currently under easement that is held by the Virginia Outdoors Foundation. That easement will be assigned to the board, and some of you may recall I presented this transaction in our September 2024 meeting. The deed of assignment for this project has been drafted, and it's with our counsel at OAG for review. The assignment will be recorded prior to the consolidated deed. The 7th and last property in this phase is known as the Proctor 2 Tract. It is just over 8 acres. The Proctor 2 Tract is the only property in this phase that is currently not subject to an easement, and it will be incorporated into our consolidated deed as new additional uneased property. And of note, many of the easements that are in this phase are associated with grants from the American Battlefield Protection Program, DHR's Virginia Battlefield Preservation Fund, the Virginia Land Conservation Fund, or the Transportation Enhancement Program. So where applicable, we are also notifying and pulling in those grant partners as necessary. So just to quickly show you a few images of these 7 properties, I'm going to start with the Proctor 2 Tract. This property is 8.1 acres. It's improved for residential use and otherwise is comprised of grass lawn interspersed with sections of mature trees. As I mentioned, this is the only property that is currently not subject to an easement. It fronts General Winder Road and James Madison Highway. It will be placed under easement as part of the consolidated deed for this phase. The Proctor 2 Tract contains a number of non-historic resources, which are shown in the photos here. This includes 2 dwellings, a barn, a concrete block workshop, driveway, and then associated infrastructure such as wells and septic. The Department of Conservation and Recreation intends to retain these buildings and structures for operational uses at the park. And to facilitate this process, the American Battlefield Trust is working with DCR to make some improvements to these buildings. And those scopes of work have been submitted to DHR as recently as last week for us to take a look at. And it impacts both the exterior and the interior of the dwellings on this property, but mostly these changes are on the interior. The next Phase 2 property is the 155.7 acre Wiseman tract. This property is still subject to the easement held by the Virginia Outdoors Foundation. It was recorded in the year 2000. In addition to its Civil War battlefield significance, this property also contains 2 historic cemeteries, 2 historic monuments, and approximately 20 historic stone markers. The Wiseman tract is already open to the public and contains numerous amenities associated with this use, including trails, benches, interpretive signs, informational signs, some cannons, porta-johns, and similar amenities. No changes to this property are anticipated at this time. The next property is the 2.0461 acre Holby tract, which is subject to an easement held by the board that was recorded in 2013. Although the property was previously used for residential purposes, it's currently unimproved forested land. No changes to the property are anticipated at this time. And in terms of current conditions, the trust is working to remove some trash and debris that has accumulated on the property, primarily near the edges of the roadway that runs along its boundary. The next property is the 4.467 acre Broomfield tract, again, subject to an easement held by the board and recorded in 2013. This primarily wooded property contains a dwelling that is currently used as a visitors center operated by the Friends of the Cedar Mountain Battlefield. The Broomfield tract is open to the public and contains amenities associated with this use, including the information center, as well as interpretive signs and informational signs, a picnic table, shed, bench, trailhead, and a paved driveway and parking area. DCR intends to retain this building and the associated amenities for operational uses at the park. And again, they are working to make some improvements to the building, both the interior and the exterior, which DHR is currently reviewing. The American Battlefield Trust is also working to remove some trash and debris that has accumulated on the property. The next property is the 6 acre Proctor 1 tract, subject to an easement held by the board and recorded in 2013. This property is unimproved forested land. No changes to the Proctor 1 tract are anticipated at this time. And again, the trust is working to remove some trash and debris on one small portion of the property. Next, we have the 86.539 acre Cedar Run or Trimble tract, subject to an easement held by the board and recorded in 2021. Although currently unoccupied, the property is improved for residential and agricultural uses. Those improvements include a dwelling, a collapsed frame building, a concrete block shed, 3 metal sheds, wells, septic, an asphalt parking area, and a concrete driveway. Portions of the property are actively leased for agricultural crop production. Per the terms of the existing easement, the non-historic buildings and structures, which are shown in the photos on this slide, must be removed no later than August of 2026. The trust, American Battlefield Trust, is currently in the process of drafting a scope of work to have a phase 1 archaeological survey of the property conducted prior to removal of the buildings and structures. The goal is to have the survey and removal of the buildings and structures completed before the property is transferred to the Department of Conservation and Recreation. And the last property in this phase is known as the Pagrams Battery Tract. It is 44.752 acres, subject to an easement held by the board and recorded in 2024. This unimproved property is primarily agricultural fields in row crop production. No changes to the Pagram's battery tract are anticipated at this time. The trust is working to remove some accumulated trash and debris on this property as well. So those were the 7 properties that are included in this phase. I briefly want to talk about some of the applicable easement language and policy. Assignment of the easements, as I mentioned early in the presentation, is required per the fiscal year 23-24 budget bill. Importantly, most of the existing Phase 2 easements provide that if any agency or entity of the Commonwealth acquires the underlying fee interest in the property, the easement doesn't merge into the fee but continues to encumber the property. The easements also contain language that permit the easement holder to assign the easement in its discretion if the assignment is to a qualified and eligible easement holder, if it's consistent with the Open Space Land Act, if all of the restrictions and covenants and the preservation purposes that are set forth in the easement are carried out in perpetuity. And then in some of these easements, there's a requirement that either the American Battlefield Protection Program approve the assignment in advance of recordation, or there's a requirement that DHR, as the administrator of the easement, notifies ABPP of the board's intent to assign the easement. So consistent with these provisions, the Department of Conservation and Recreation meets the requirements as a qualified and eligible easement holder under the Open Space Land Act. And additionally, the consolidated easement will continue the restrictions and covenants and the preservation purposes that are set forth in the original easement in perpetuity. And lastly, ABPP has reviewed and approved assignment of the easements as applicable in January and February of this year. The easements also contain some applicable language about amendments. Most of these easements contain provisions that permit amendments, provided that certain conditions are met. The amendments must not affect the perpetual duration of the easement, conflict with its purposes, reduce the protection or of the preservation and conservation values, and the amendment cannot affect the status of the easement as an open space easement or of the easement holder as a public body. Some of the Phase 2 easements do require that we provide notice to the American Battlefield Protection Program of our intent to amend the easement. And as a reminder, the board also has an adopted policy on amendments, which is policy number 6. This policy generally states that an amendment should strengthen the protection afforded by the original easement to the resources on the property. And for example, the consolidated easement will include protections for water quality, riparian buffers, forested cover, or expanded archaeological resource protection, where some of the existing easements did not originally have these provisions. The policy also states an amendment may be preservation neutral, and that it neither strengthens nor weakens the protections to the resources that were established in the original easement agreements. The consolidated deed for the 7 Phase 2 properties will be consistent with both the existing easement amendment provisions as well as easement program policy number 6. So in summary, DHR is proposing to first record the deed assigning the Wiseman Tract easement from the Virginia Outdoors Foundation to the board. And again, the board approved that transaction back in September, and that is still in process. After we obtain all of the necessary approvals for this phase of the project, DHR will draft one deed of quite a mouthful, acceptance, assignment, amendment, restatement, and consolidation of historic preservation and open space easements. And that deed will incorporate the following, which is acceptance of the Proctor 2 tract easement, assignment of the board's easement interest in the 7 properties that I just described for you earlier. And then again, amendment, restatement, and consolidation of the easements into one co-held easement by DCR and the Board of Historic Resources. Some specific provisions of the easement will be negotiated with DCR as we move forward. However, the consolidated deed will be based on DHR's standard template and carry forward restrictions from the existing easements. It will be consistent with our program policies and the language of the existing easements. Similarly to the Phase 1 Brandy Station project, we will draft the easement so that the Board of Historic Resources, as administered by DHR, will have primary responsibility for monitoring stewardship and approvals per the consolidated easement. And we included this in our Phase 1 easement, that the board's determination shall be controlling should there be any dispute between the co-holders regarding a determination made under the easement. So for this transaction, it needs to be completed by the beginning of August of this year. There are still a number of steps that we need to take. Some have been completed and others are outstanding. We've done all of our required notification and our easement acceptance committee review and approval. Step number 3 here, we're presenting this project to you today. Afterward, we still need to record that Wiseman assignment, draft the consolidated deed, and continue doing additional monitoring and baseline documentation site visits. Concurrently with that, the American Battlefield Trust and we'll be doing those renovations to the existing buildings and structures and their own conditions assessment and working on removing any trash and debris. Additionally, for the Cedar Mountain and Trimble Track property, the Phase 1 survey needs to happen and the buildings need to be removed. And then lastly, we have review by council as well as our project partners and DCR, which they are beginning this now, but they conduct their own due diligence process for acquisition of the properties. And the date for recording right now is on or prior to August 1st of this year. So in terms of our what we're asking for the board's approval today, as part of the Phase 2 Cedar Mountain unit for Culpeper Battlefield State Park, the Easement Acceptance Committee has recommended that the board accept an easement on the 8.09 5-acre Proctor 2 tract, assign the following easements to the Department of Conservation and Recreation, includes the Wiseman tract, the Holvey tract, Broomfield tract, Proctor 1 tract, Cedar Run Trimble tract, Pegram's Battery tract, and the Proctor 2 tract. And then step 3 would be join with DCR as co-holder of a deed of acceptance, assignment, restatement, amendment, and consolidation of historic preservation and open space easements for the properties listed in 2A through 2G above. And the restrictions and preservation and conservation purposes are to be continued in perpetuity. Of the existing easements are to be continued in perpetuity. And the board's approval is subject to the following standard condition: final review of any title work, survey, draft easements, and other recorded and unrecorded documents affecting title by the Office of the Attorney General. Per this review, council may identify additional issues that require documentation or action. And so we are asking for the board's approval of the Phase 2 project as I just read through. Does anybody have any questions? That was a lot. I'm sorry.
Oh, anybody on the board have any questions?
It's ambitious.
It is ambitious, but we did it last year in a shorter time frame. So hopefully we at least have a good model to use
Yeah.
for this phase that worked last year. And we'll get it done in time.
Fantastic.
Not a question, but a comment as on the first phase. Kudos to everyone involved in this. This is very complicated set of steps, as you see, and it takes a lot to make sure no ball is dropped in the process of doing this. And it's going to be a net benefit overall, but it's a lot of steps to get there. So appreciate all that everyone's doing to get us there.
It's a
Thank
great celebration last September. Or was that September?
June.
Or last June. Yeah, I guess it was a warm
Yeah.
day. Yeah. For the opening of that state park. I just had some questions about a couple of the buildings that were on the tracks.
Yes.
It just mentioned that exterior improvements. Is there are they going to be made more uniform in appearance, or is it just general maintenance improvements?
It's primarily, it won't be to make them more uniform. One building I think is going to get an ADA, some kind of ADA ramp. I think a deck needs to be replaced. The roofs are being replaced. So it's primarily things like that. I think on one of them, they're addressing some drainage issues. So it's not cosmetic so much as repairs, and then some needed improvements to make them accessible, particularly the one that's the information center building.
So ultimately, this just kind of consolidates all the work you've done already, so that it's just under one.
Yes.
Yes. To simplify your lives. I
Yes.
truly hope. Okay. If there's no further discussion or questions at all, may I have a motion to approve Culpeper Battlefield State Park Phase 2, Cedar Mountain Battlefield. So it was steps 1 through 3 on the slide, plus the condition as presented by staff.
I move the approval of the phase 2 of Culpeper State Battlefield Park.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thanks. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? No. The motion is approved.
Thank you. Now gonna turn it back over to Kyle, who's there with you in person to present the next items. Thank you.
Wendy, now hopefully this will be the easy part. We don't have any, I think, unusual ones in our regular agenda. So good afternoon to the board. Thank you all for your time today. I'm about to present 3 new easement offers. And Chair Giorgiani, as we move forward, do you want to I'll present all 3 and then allow you all to vote?
Yes, please.
Okay. So there we go. Our first property today is the Funk Tract located in Warren County, Virginia. The applicant for this easement is the Shenandoah Valley Battlefields Foundation, which has received a Virginia Land Conservation Foundation grant and will also apply for an American Battlefield Protection Program grant to assist with the fee simple acquisition. The Funk Tract consists of a single 45.56 acre parcel located between Longmeadow Road and Water Plant Road. Today, the property is improved with a small domestic complex at its northeast corner that includes 7 structures: a brick dwelling, a former kitchen wing, a metal shed, metal barn, 2 concrete block buildings, and a Quonset hut. The remainder of the property is an agricultural use, primarily hay production. The Funk Tract is historically significant because it is entirely within the core area of the Cedar Creek Battlefield, which has been given a preservation priority 1.1 Class A by the Civil War Sites Advisory Commission. Sites with a priority rating or preservation priority of 1 are those with critical need for action, and battlefields rated Class A are those that had a direct and decisive influence on their campaigns and the outcome of the war. In this case, it's associated with Sheridan's Shenandoah Valley campaign from August to December 1864. The Battle of Cedar Creek occurred on October 19th, 1864, when Confederate forces under the command of Jubal Early launched a surprise early morning attack against encamped Union troops on the north side of Cedar Creek. This attack initially resulted in a rapid Union retreat, but their lines reformed near Middletown. lost my place for a second. Union Major General Philip Sheridan famously returned to his army, riding in from Winchester and rallying his reorganized army to decisively defeat Early's Army of the Valley. During the battle, Confederate forces advanced through the Funk Tract before attacking the encamped Union 8th Corps. And this battle essentially ends Confederate control of the valley during the war and sets the stage for Petersburg. The Easement Acceptance Committee recommends acceptance of the Funk Tract easement offer subject to the following conditions. One, that Shenandoah Valley Battlefield Foundation is required to work with the Shenandoah Valley Electric Cooperative to locate any existing recorded or unrecorded easements for the undocumented utility line along Long Meadow Road. If the utility easement is unrecorded or does not exist, the Shenandoah Valley Battlefields Foundation will work with the electric cooperative to record a new utility easement prior to the recordation of DHR's easement if possible. And Carrie has been working hard on this, and they've already made some progress with SBBF. So this condition is moving forward. And our second condition is a final review of the title work, title commitment survey, draft easement, and other recorded and unrecorded documents affecting the title to the property by the Office of the Attorney General. Per this review, council may identify additional issues that require documentation or action. Our second property today is the Welch Pendon Tract located in Henrico County, Virginia, along the Darbytown Road. The property consists of 2 parcels totaling 13.58 acres. Today, the Welch Pendon Tract is entirely under wood cover, bounded by residential parcels to the east and south. The applicant for this easement is the American Battlefield Trust, which will apply for an American Battlefield Protection Program grant and was awarded a Virginia Battlefield Preservation Fund grant to assist with the fee simple acquisition of the property. The Welch Pendon Tract is historically significant because it lies within 3 Civil War battlefields, as identified by the Civil War Sites Advisory Commission. Most significantly, it is entirely within the core of the Glendale battlefield, which has been given a Preservation Priority 1.1 Class B rating. The Battle of Glendale occurred on June 30th, 1862, and it was a critical part of the 7 Days battles, which halted Union Major General George McClellan's advance on Richmond. Following the Battle of Savage's Station, the Union Army was in full retreat towards the James River, and in response, Robert E. Lee moved to attack the Union at Glendale, which was an important crossroads and the last opportunity to cut off the Union retreat to the river. Confederate divisions under James Longstreet and H.P. Hill initially broke through the Union lines, but successful Union counterattacks led by Joseph Hooker and Philip Kearny allowed the Union to hold their position. This Union victory secured their retreat and set the stage for the Battle of Malvern Hill. During the battle, Union positions were just east of the property, and Confederate forces moved through the property when attacking. The property is also partially within the core and entirely within the study area of the Deep Bottom 1 battlefield and entirely within the study area of the Deep Bottom 2 battlefield. Deep Bottom 1 has a Preservation Priority 2.3 Class C rating, and Deep Bottom 2 has a Preservation Priority 1.3 Class B rating. Both of these battles were Union offensive north of the James River in an attempt to draw Confederate attention away from the Petersburg defenses. The Easement Acceptance Committee recommends acceptance of the Welch Pendon Tract easement offer subject to the following conditions. The trust is required to work with VEPCO, Dominion Power, to locate any existing recording or unrecorded easements for the undocumented utility line along Darbytown Road on both parcels for a small span of the utility line along Carter's Mill Road on the 11.7.1741 acre parcel. If the utility easements are unrecorded or do not exist, the trust should work with VEPCO Dominion to record new utility easements prior to the recordation of DHR's easement. And our second condition is final review of the title work, title commitment, survey, draft easement, and other recorded and unrecorded documents affecting title to the property by the Office of the Attorney General. Per this review, council may identify additional issues that require documentation or action. And then our final property for today is the Oni Tract, located in Gloucester County, Virginia. The tract consists of a single 3-acre parcel entirely under mature wooded cover, and it is adjacent to the 229.1 acre Fairfield tract, which is already protected by the board. The applicant is the Fairfield Foundation, and acquisition of the property was funded by a grant from the Virginia Outdoors Foundation Preservation Trust Fund, which requires conveyance of an easement. The Oni tract is historically significant because it is within the Fairfield site, archaeological site, as well as the related Fairfield Archaeological District. Fairfield site was listed on the Virginia Landmarks Register and the National Register of Historic Places in 1973 and includes the archaeological remains of Fairfield Manor constructed in 1694. The Fairfield Archaeological District, extending from Fairfield Manor, has been determined eligible for the Virginia Landmarks Register and the National Register of Historic Places by DHR. District corresponds to an 1847 boundary plat of Fairfield Plantation, along with the archaeological remains of the main dwelling, outbuildings, and quarter farms associated with more than 2 centuries of occupation. The district is also associated with the post-emancipation Piney Swamp community, which was established by formerly enslaved men, women, and children from Fairfield following the Civil War. Due to its association with both the site and the district, the Oni tract has the potential to contain further archaeological resources related to the plantation and later communities. The Easement Acceptance Committee recommends acceptance of the Oni tract easement offer subject to the following conditions. And it's just one today. Final review of the title work, title commitment, survey, draft easement, and other recorded and unrecorded documents affecting title to the property by the Office of the Attorney General. Per this review, council may identify additional issues that are relevant. So if you all have any questions, I'll be happy to answer those to the best of my ability. That's it for our new easements today.
Any questions? Great. If there's no questions, may I have a motion to approve easement offers for consideration 1 through 3, so the Funk tract, the Welsh Pandan tract, and the Ani tract, as presented by the staff.
To accept those easement offers?
Great. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? None. The motion is approved. Thank you.
And now Megan will continue with our policy.
Yes, so these are 2 easement policy updates.
Good afternoon. I have a couple administrative aspects to present to you today. First is policy number 12, an update to our administrative fees. Initially adopted in June of 2017, the policy was most recently revised in March of 2021. When we realized that we needed to revise the policy again to reflect the fact that the board approvals are now valid for 3 years instead of 2, which was reflected in the footnote, we reviewed the complete document and more clearly aligned it with existing program policies. These edits include the addition of a sentence indicating DHR will retain an easement application for 5 years, after which a new application and fee are required, and directly referencing the reconsideration application in item C. Pretty straightforward. I did choose the red line version. If there are not any questions, I would like a vote to the revised.
Okay. Great. Any questions? So we're just today only approving this particular one, policy for 12. So let's see. Do I have a motion to approve this update to easement program policy number 12?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, the motion is approved to update policy 12.
Thank you. Policy number 13 is a new policy and it is currently under review by the council. And so we're presenting it to you today just as a preliminary draft and not asking for a vote. Generally, this policy is intended to outline the administrative process that DHR and the board will follow when requests for use or a use incompatible with the protections of an easement are received. Other easement holding entities have similar policies, and adopting our own is beneficial to project proponents, staff, and the board as it presents a roadmap and helps us manage expectations. You will note that such a request necessitates board action at multiple meetings and must satisfy multiple specific requirements. The process is deliberately complicated and protracted as the easements held by the board are perpetual in nature, and modifications that compromise the level of protection afforded to the conservation values must be diligently scrutinized to ensure the integrity of the easement program as a whole is maintained. No vote is requested today. Instead, I invite you to send any comments to my attention via email, and we will present the finalized policy to you in June. But I'm happy to answer questions.
Any questions?
I mean, could you say a little bit more about the types of situations when you are
Yeah.
involved in conversion and diversion?
Very many of
Yeah.
these, but we have, I'll say, flirted with a couple that we have been able to redirect through project review for a
Right.
better solution that is. What we're seeing is sometimes as the property changes hands, the new owner would like to do something that the initial easement was designed to prevent. And sometimes it's as simple as a new utility line by a municipality that's just inconsistent with the overall easement. So it varies widely. Haven't had any recently, but felt like now is a good time to put a policy in place. Because I think what we see as far as the project proponents that are coming to us thus far, they're pretty surprised by the length of time it takes and the fact that it can't be done with staff review. And that is, again, by design. It's your easement or decision to make.
I might have a question about the other entities that you mentioned. Does VOF have something like this or?
In fact, we started with their policy when we began to draft ours. And I think it's the goal, and OAG folks can correct me if I'm wrong, but to align state agencies so that they're similarly approaching such requests.
I know it's been a controversial issue at times, so that's why I was just.
We have gratefully been able to,
Yes.
to negotiate and reposition some requests.
Thank you.
Now I get to do the fun part, which is the sort of the ta-da, and you've been very busy since your last meeting. These are the 6 easements that we've recorded since your December meeting. The first of which is Starport 2. Shenandoah Valley Battlefield Foundation donated an easement on Starport 2 on the 2nd Winchester Battlefield. And it's adjacent to the Starport property, which contains the remains of a fort that was occupied by both Union and Confederate troops during the war. Capital Region Land Conservancy donated an easement on the Campbell's Bridge tract in Chesterfield County as a condition of their Virginia Land Conservation Foundation grant. The easement contains the ruins and archaeological remains of multiple mill complexes and industrial sites important to the development of the Appomattox River between the 18th and 20th centuries. The property was transferred to Chesterfield County for incorporation into a public park, along with the additional acreage protected by BOF. The easement protecting 100 acres of Brandy Rock Farm in Culpeper County was facilitated by federal grant funds from the American Battlefield Protection Program and the state grant funds from the Virginia Land Conservation Foundation. The property was the location of Union attacks on the Confederate left and retains a high degree of landscape integrity, including a historic road trace that was used during the war. John and Patricia Pearsall donated an easement on the Ellen Glasgow House here in Richmond prior to conveying the property. The Ellen Glasgow House is a National Historic Landmark and was home and primary residence of Pulitzer Prize-winning author. The Pearsall separately eased the lots adjacent to the house in order to protect the view shed, the main source. And most recently, staff completed the negotiations on Camp Holly Farm on the Deep Bottom 1 battlefield. The easement protecting nearly 140 acres was recorded on March 6th in Henrico County. The property is also associated with military encampments during the American Revolution and the War of 1812 and may contain archaeological resources related to those encampments.
Are there any other questions or comments from the board?
Great work.
Glad to see some of those reaching
It's exciting.
fruition. Yeah.
Thank you. May I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
Thank you. Second, all right, thank you, Martin. All in favor, say aye.
All right.
Aye, all opposed, no. Ayes have it. The meeting of the Board of Historic Resources is adjourned.
All right.